succeeded in taking the capital, they would surely attack the Foxhall Foundry in Georgetown and likely force their way over the bridge to plunder and pillage Patterson's mill. One of my officers, Lieutenant William Binns, suggested the precious cargo be dispatched further west, to Leesburg, for storage in the basement of a sturdy house he inherited from his father. He pointed out the all-brick home has a spacious barrel vault and a dry basement, and the place is secured by Reverend John Littlejohn, the former sheriff of Loudoun County. Mr. Pleasanton agreed to store our government's papers in a place protected by a law officer who was a man of God. Since my militiamen still had no orders other than holding the bridge, I directed Lieutenant Binns and 25 of our mounted militiamen to accompany Mr. Pleasanton and the horse-drawn vehicles conveying our government's most important documents to Leesburg. As they prepared to sally forth at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a carriage and cart came racing across the bridge. In the carriage, accompanied only by a manservant and a single dragoon of the Presidential Guard, was Mrs. Madison. The President's wife hastily informed us the American army has been defeated at a place in Maryland called Bladensburg, and British troops were now on the march into the capital. Further, she said, my husband was at the fight and is now in flight, whereabouts unknown, with the remnant of our army. Mrs. Madison acknowledged she departed the executive mansion in great haste, bringing little more than some presidential correspondence and a portrait of our first president, General George Washington, rolled up in a tablecloth. She also revealed a courier, dispatched by her husband, had instructed her to meet the president at Wiley's Tavern on the Georgetown Turnpike, once he escaped the clutches of the British. Since Georgetown Turnpike was the route the Pleasanton expedition would be taking to Leesburg, and fearing she would be captured, I convinced Mrs. Madison and her escort to join Lieutenant Binns's motley caravan. He placed a carriage near the van of his unit, with 4 of our militiamen as mounted guards, and they departed up the hill in the midst of a terrible downpour. Less than an hour afterwards there was a tremendous explosion from east of the capital. At dusk, a newly arrived refugee from the city informed us the blast had come from our sailors blowing up the magazine at the Navy Yard on the Anacostia River. By dark, it seemed the entire city was ablaze. My now depleted militia unit spent the night soaking wet at the Chain Bridge on high alert. Thanks be to God, the British stopped their advance after looting and burning nearly all the government buildings in the capital. The Executive Mansion, the Treasury, the offices of State, War and Navy, and the Capitol Building are now but smoking ruins. The only official structure left unscathed in the city seems to be the Marine Barracks. This morning we have finally been ordered into the fight. A British flotilla is making its way up the Potomac, heading for the city of Alexandria. Colonel Minor has directed my Virginia militiamen to ferry over the river tonight, to reinforce our Maryland militia brethren at Fort Warburton, across the Potomac from President Washington's home at Mount Vernon. To our great misfortune and dismay, we no longer have Daniel Morgan to rally more patriots against this vicious, unconscionable assault. Now, should misfortune befall me on this mission, once the British have been defeated and order is restored, you must do your utmost to retrieve 2 sets of most important papers. First, the aforementioned official documents and records Lieutenant Binns has taken to Leesburg must be recovered and preserved. If necessary, seek him out or find Reverend Littlejohn or Mr. Stephen Pleasanton of the Department of State to aid you in this effort. Second, as you know, I have labored for nearly 2 decades seeking fair restitution and a just annuity for the riflemen with whom I served during our first war for independence. When he was in Congress, General Morgan was our advocate, but since his passing in July 1802, the task has fallen to me.